If you've been dieting, your face is leaned out, your arms look better, you can even see your upper abs starting to come through, but that lower belly fat just sits there like it hasn't got the memo, well, you're not broken, you're not stuck, and you're definitely not the only one dealing with this. In fact, most people quit right before this is about to go, and in this video, I'll show you why lower belly fat is always the last to go, what's actually happening in your body, and exactly how to finally get rid of it. I've been a personal trainer for 11 years and trained myself for 14, and the clearest way I can show you why this happens starts with the most frustrating period of my own training. And to explain why this is so common, I need to tell you about the first time I tried to properly cut after a bulk phase, because what happened is exactly what most people experience and almost nobody explains it properly. I remember standing in front of the mirror a few weeks into that cut, looking at my arms, my chest, even the top of my abs starting to show through, and then looking down at the lower belly and genuinely thinking, what is going on? Everything else has clearly changed, but that lower portion feels like it's taken ages to get rid of. And it was the same as when I started. I'd been training properly, eating the right way, doing everything right. The cut was working, and the lower belly fat just sat there, not moving, barely changing, while everything around it was clearly responding to what I was doing. And here's what I thought at the time, and what most people think in exactly this situation. Something must be wrong. Either the approach isn't working, or my body just doesn't respond there, or I've hit a plateau and I need to change something. I genuinely didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't know how to push through it either. And here's what was actually going on, and why it changes everything once you understand it. And everything I'm covering today is built in the Soft to Lean program, linked in the description. It's the full framework for getting lean and staying there. It's completely free. So think about your body fat like a set of bank accounts. Some of those accounts are easy to access. You can withdraw from them quickly and without much friction. Your face, your arms, your upper body, these are the easy access accounts. But when you're in a deficit, your body pulls from these first because they are the most accessible. Whereas the lower belly, and for most people also the love handles and lower back, is the locked vault. The savings account with restrictions on it, for example. Your body knows it's there. It will eventually go for it, but it's the last place it pulls from. And here's why that matters more than most people even realise. The order your body loses fat in is roughly the reverse of the order it's stored in. The lower belly tends to be where fat goes first when you gain it, which means it's the last place it comes from when you lose it. And this isn't a design flaw either, it's just how your body works. The easy access accounts get emptied first, and the locked vault savings accounts get touched once everything else is running low. So when you're dieting and everything is leaning out except the lower belly, that's not a plateau. That's your body working exactly as it's supposed to. You've cleared the easy accounts, the savings vault is next. You just need to stay consistent long enough to actually get there. And here's the part that almost every video on this topic completely misses, because this is the specific thing that separates the people who eventually lose the lower belly fat from the people who never quite get there. Getting lean to a certain point is one phase, whereas the final push is a completely different game. When you're earlier in the process, more body fat to lose, more obvious progress every single week. The progress is obvious and it's consistent. The scale moves, the mirror changes, the momentum carries you through it, and it's not easy, but the progress is visible, and that visibility keeps you going. When you get to the final stretch though, the lower belly is still there. Everything else is leaning out, and that changes completely. And progress starts to appear slow, or it just stops. The scale barely moves, the mirror looks almost the same week to week, your hunger might increase slightly, and your energy might dip. And it genuinely feels like nothing is happening. But here's what's actually happening underneath that feeling. Your body is actually working harder than at any point of the whole fat loss phase. It's pulling from the most stubborn stores, the ones it's most reluctant to release, the ones with the poorest circulation and the most resistance. The work is happening, it's just happening somewhere that takes longer to show up visually. And this is exactly where most people quit. And it's not because they've failed, because they don't know they're in the hardest phase, and they just assume the lack of visible progress means something has gone wrong. And I did it myself during that first cut. 2 weeks of the scale barely moving, looking identical in the mirror, convinced the approach had stopped working. So I changed things. I changed my calories, changed my training, reset the whole thing right before it would have started moving anyway. But I didn't find that out until later, and it's the thing I wish someone had told me back then before I quit. And most people quit around 2 to 4 weeks from finally losing it. Cash McCline is the one who's shown me this the most clearly, because his situation is the one I see most often with the people I work with who are genuinely close but can't quite see it. He came to me wanting to get lean into the best shape of his life before he turned 40. He had a demanding job, a schedule with not much room for error, I guess you could say, and he was doing everything right. He was training consistently, genuinely committed, the results were coming, and his body was clearly changing. But that last little bit of belly fat to really get to see his abs just wasn't shifting the way he wanted it to. Everything else had responded, but that last bit just sat there, and after weeks of it not moving, he was starting to wonder whether it ever would. And here's what I told him. And it's the same thing I wish someone had told me during my first cut. You're not stuck. You're just in the hardest phase. The work you've been doing has has cleared everything else, and now your body is working on that last bit. The thing it's most reluctant to give up. The mistake most people make here is changing something, switching the approach, dropping the training, deciding it's not working. But the approach is working. It just needs more time than the earlier phases did. So Cash stayed consistent. He pushed through the phase where progress felt invisible, and the lower belly finally started to shift, as you can see on the photos here. And it wasn't dramatic all at once, but consistently over time, week on week. And once his body had run out of easier places to pull from, this is when it started to pull from that low belly fat. And as you can see, just before he turned 40 years old, he saw his abs and he looked great. So here's the practical side of things, because staying consistent is the answer, but there are specific things that make that final phase work better and feel more manageable. The calorie deficit still has to be real, of course. There's nothing in this section replaces that, but these are the things that help in the final phase when your body is the most resistant. So the first one is sleep. This is the most underestimated variable in the final phase, because when sleep is poor, stress hormones rise, and elevated stress hormones make it way harder for your body to shift stubborn belly fat. The lower belly specifically responds poorly to consistently poor sleep. Getting 7 hours isn't just about recovery, it's about giving your body the environment where it can actually let go of what it's been holding on to. And the next one we got stress, and it's the same mechanism as sleep. High ongoing stress keeps those hormones elevated, and that actively works against shifting stubborn belly fat in the final phase. And a lot of the time, you could argue this is just correlation, because naturally, if you're lower on sleep, you've got more stress. Naturally, you want to have more energy. So when you want to have more energy, what do? You go to the cupboards, you go to the fridge, you reach for more food, which means you're consuming more calories, which means you're not in a deficit. Whereas I think a lot of people online think that sleep and stress are the cause of it, making your body all of a sudden wanting to hold on to belly fat, when actually it's more correlation. But it's not a reason to panic about stress, it's a reason to take the basics seriously. Sleep properly, move daily, don't train yourself into the ground, daily walking, not as cardio, but more as recovery, and get outside and moving consistently. Even just a decent amount of steps each day genuinely helps your body get out of its own way in the final phase. And it's one of the most lowest friction things you can add, and one of the most consistently useful. And the last one is the simplest change of the four, which is caffeine timing. Cutting caffeine off early afternoon makes a real difference to sleep quality over time. Better sleep means lower stress hormones, and lower stress hormones mean the lower belly fat finally starts to respond. Small habit, but the effect does compound pretty quickly. And here's the honest version of how these four things work together. None of them are a strict shortcut. None of them are going to replace the training or the nutrition. But in the final phase, when everything else is leaned out and the low belly fat is the last thing to go, these are the tiny little details, the micro habits, I guess you could say, that remove the friction that's slowing the process down. And here's the thing worth saying honestly too, because this question comes up every time I talk about this. You don't have to get to 10% body fat to look genuinely good. For most people, getting lean enough is to see real definition, somewhere in that 12 to 15% range, which is more than enough and is a sustainable place to be long term. Getting leaner than that requires much more effort, more consistency, less room for error, and it comes with the kind of final phase this video is all about. The lower belly fat is the last to go, because that's just how your body works. Whether you push all the way or find a more sustainable place that works for your life, the principle is the same. You're just in the hardest phase of a process that is actually working. And most people quit when they're 2 to 4 weeks away from finally losing it. They see the lower belly fat not moving while everything else is leaned out, and they just assume something is wrong. So they change the approach entirely, or just stop right before the body would have had no choice but to pull from that belly fat, and you would have seen your abs. But even with all that said, here's what most people then struggle with once they understand this. The actual day-to-day consistency during the hardest phase. Knowing you're close doesn't automatically make it easier to stay on track when progress feels invisible, but there's one specific thing that makes the final phase significantly more manageable, and most people never think to use it. I've got a video that covers exactly what it is over here, so watch that next.